other day in the pages of the New Yorker magazine, I came across a kind of compendium of pro-choice illogic, a summary of almost all the twisted approaches that the pro-abortion faction tends to use. It's Jeffrey Toobin's article entitled Not Covered, and it was featured in the Talk of the Town section of the magazine, which is a kind of showcase for Upper East Side opinion. Toobin commences with the undoubtedly accurate remark, abortion is almost as old as childbirth itself. But then he adds, as though the second statement follows from the first, there's always been a need for some women to end their pregnancies. I won't focus on the facile euphemism about ending a pregnancy as though it were the equivalent of removing a wart. I'll simply observe that following the same logic, one could easily say that slavery has existed from the beginning of civilization and that economic necessity has legitimately dictated that some people have always needed to enslave their fellow human beings. The point is, the commonness of a practice does not determine a thing in regard to its moral status. But Toobin persists in making just this association. He shares with us the statistic that 35% of all women of reproductive age in America today will have had an abortion by the time they're 45. And then he draws the ethical conclusion. It might be assumed that such a common procedure would be included in a nation's plan to protect the health of its citizens. Now again, I won't dwell on Toobin's willingness to disregard utterly the health of those unborn citizens killed through abortion. I'll only observe once again how he blithely assumes that the ethical acceptability of a practice follows from its prevalence. Graft, theft, street violence, prostitution, child abuse are all common practices, but we shouldn't be tempted on account of their popularity to remove the legal prescriptions against them. Toobin provides another delicious bit of euphemistic sleight of hand in his criticism of the Stupak Amendment. He complains that Stupak's proposal, backed by the way by a number of Democrats, will make, quote, abortion services harder to come by, even turning them into, I'm quoting again, a second-class form of medicine. Once more, the child who will be killed as a result of this service is utterly disregarded. And frankly, how bizarre it is to hold that putting children to death might be legitimately construed as a type of medicine or health care. Toobin beautifully demonstrates as well how the ideological support for abortion on demand is correlative to a tyrannical invasion of the government into the private sphere of conscience. Already uneasy with the Hyde Amendment, which put some restrictions on the federal funding of abortion some 30 years ago, Toobin now complains about the proliferation of conscience clauses, which would allow medical professionals, nurses, doctors, pharmacists, etc., to withdraw from cooperating with procedures that they find morally objectionable, especially abortion. He's sorely vexed, too, at the Catholic bishops, who, in fighting for these exceptions, have had the gall to, as he puts it, squeeze legislators in a way that would do any K Street lobbyist proud. But he's relieved that President Obama has promised to revise and overturn the policy. Now here's my point. The aggressiveness of the state apparently knows no limits. Not only can it determine behavior through punishment and coercion, but it can reach into the privacy of the self and override the dictates of the conscience itself. More to it, religious leaders have, it seems, no right at all to advocate publicly their point of view. Do you see, by the way, why some critics have maintained that pro-choice ideology has conduced toward an erosion of some of the fundamental principles of a democracy? Toobin's final argument is, I think, the most specious of all. Referencing Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, he says that abortion rights center on a woman's autonomy to determine her life's course and thus to enjoy equal citizenship stature. The first problem with this line of reasoning, of course, is its utter disregard of the other person involved, namely the unborn child, who's accorded no dignity whatsoever and whose rights and citizenship are completely unacknowledged. But the second difficulty is the valorization of an autonomy divorced from moral objectivity. As John Paul II never tired of reminding us, freedom is properly ordered to the truth, since the longing of the will is for a good that truly and objectively satisfies it. Pure autonomy, self-expression, self-determination, is the will turned in on itself, stewing in its own juices. It is, of course, far from insignificant that the watchword of the anti-life movement is pro-choice, and its preferred strategy, on full display in Toobin's article, is the conscious bracketing of the object of that choice. You know, ideas have consequences. What's become, I think, especially clear in the context of the abortion debate is that bad ideas have very bad consequences indeed.